It all started a few years ago. A young man named Adeola lived with his parents in the western part of Africa, in a small village called Ife. Adeola happily assisted his father on the farm. The family lived happily, never lacking anything. One afternoon, while Adeola was walking down the narrow path leading to their farm, he met a young lady from the same town. She was the daughter of the late Ogunremi family. Adeola was so amazed by her beauty that he couldn't help but stare. Her name was Ajoke. Adeola couldn't stop thinking about the most beautiful maiden he'd seen on his way to the farm. All through the night, Adeola couldn't sleep. 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind. What if Ajoke refused his proposal? What if her parents didn't like him for their daughter? There's something strange about this, Adeola thought, as he finally gave in to sleep. The following morning, as early as 8 o'clock, Adeola left for the farm, hoping to see Ajoke, because that was the time she usually came to the stream. After a long talk and some agreement, Adeola and Ajoke finally became husband and wife. Years after their marriage, Ajoke gave birth to a pretty girl. The parents were so overjoyed that they named her Tobi. Tobi was a great gift given to them from heaven. Tragedy entered the house when Mr. Adeola fell from a palm tree. Ajoke was too young to live like a widow, so she remarried a man whom she thought would make a good husband, as well as a great father to her child. As time passed by, things became very difficult for me and my mother. Without any knowledge of who my father is, my stepfather regularly beat up my mother and me. He didn't provide for us, nor care about us. The worst part of it all was me dropping out of school because he didn't make provisions for my education. Meanwhile, he refused to let my mother work. I desperately wanted to go back to school. After a while, my stepfather started molesting me. Scared as I was, I told my mother. I didn't understand it all. Wasn't he my father? I would always ask Mom, but she never replied. Mother pleaded with me not to worry. She became more kinder to me, as if that would erase Dad's trespasses. I kept quiet in the hope that Mom would persuade him to stop what she described as improper behavior. Then, the unimaginable happened. My stepfather violated me. I was helpless. I reported to my mom, and she started weeping. That was all she did. She was powerless to stop the harassment. After the first time, my stepfather continued to molest me at his own will. I realized my mom was too afraid to confront him. Knowing this, I suggested to her that we run away, but she wouldn't listen. I didn't know what was holding her bound to him. Once, she said to me, "A patient wife always enjoys her husband in the end." I frowned at this. Even when he is killing and ruining my life? My mother was failing her duty, and I had no regard for Dad anymore since the day he took me forcefully. At 15, I stood 4 feet 12 inches, skinny and light-skinned. I have full lips and what my friends called a perfect body. My friends always said I was beautiful. Some said I was fit to be a model. Girls envied me, and boys said they had a crush on me. I guess they thought all was well with me, but it was the other way around. I was miserable and emotionally crushed, but nobody could see this side of me. One day, my stepfather came home late and drunk as usual. I was even surprised he didn't bring any woman home. Mother slept in my room as Dad had banished her from their matrimonial bedroom. That night, Daddy came to our room and gave Mom a hard kick at her back. She jumped from the bed trying to massage the spot. "Oh no, they are at it again," I said to myself. Dad most times didn't need any excuse to cause trouble with Mom. That night was no exception. Usually, I would plead with him, but he never minded me. Instead, he would beat her up worse than one would do to a goat. I couldn't get used to him maltreating Mom, yet I couldn't help. "Where is my food?" Dad yelled. "It's on the table in your room, Mom," replied. Written all over her face were fears. "Are you sure you cooked it? Or you just made some concoction for me?" he demanded after he realized that Mom had actually cooked. "Look, I want pounded yam and a goosey soup right now," he said, and left the room. "Wait 1 minute. What is your problem?" Mom started. I stared at her in surprise. She knew she would land herself in trouble with that kind of response to Dad's impossible demands. Why did Mom choose to argue with Dad when she knew the man was insane? That night, Mom threw cautions to the winds as she raged on Headless. "Ever since I entered into this marriage, I have never known peace. Do you want to kill me? Spare my life and stop being a devil." Maybe she didn't know the devil was listening. Dad was the devil incarnate. I knew that meant trouble. "Are you mad?" he shouted. "Daddy, please, Daddy. I beg you, please," I said in tears. I knew what he could do. "Don't, Daddy. I beg you, please, just don't listen to her." "Don't daddy me, stupid girl. Always taking sides with your mother." "I am not your father," he shouted in anger, as he dragged my mother out of the room to the parlor. He threw her to the floor and started to remove his belt. "Daddy, please forgive. Please," I kept begging as I followed them out. Although I was used to this scenario, I couldn't get used to seeing my mom crying and in such pain. It made me hate him even more. It was awful. I kept begging, hoping he would stop. He turned to face me. "If you don't leave me alone, you will get the same punishment as your mother." He was shaking with rage. Hearing this, I stopped begging him. This couldn't be my father, I thought. I went to a corner and sat down weeping. I couldn't bring myself to watch Dad kick and punch Mom to a pulp, each act punctuated by an agonizing wail from my mother. Mom was really helpless. I saw her eyes became bloodshot and swollen. She had bruises all over her body. I stood up to help Mom somehow. I picked a broom from the corner of my room, hoping to hit Dad with it and get him to stop hurting Mom. But Dad wasn't done. He picked Mom up and shook her like a rag doll before throwing her forcefully against the wall. I heard a dull thud and feared that he had broken Mom's skull. I dreaded to look at her for fear that she might be dead. Mom slumped and became unconscious. She had probably passed any feelings and seemed to have stopped breathing. But Dad was too drunk to notice. He continued to hit her. The only spectator of this horror, I stood there rooted to the spot, helpless. The broom I had picked up to hit him dropped from my hand. "Daddy, she's dead," I whispered in horror. "You have killed her," I cried repeatedly. "Shut up," he yelled at me. "She is pretending," he said, slurring his words as he staggered away. I choked on tears as I sprang to Mom's motionless body. I told myself she was not dead. She was just unconscious. She'd wake up. She had to wake up. "Mom, please don't go. Don't leave me alone," I pleaded, not wanting to admit that she could be dead. "Don't die. Please wake up and tell me who my father is if Daddy is not my father, please." I sobbed inconsolably. I don't know how long I lay there, slumped over my mother's body, before I heard the sound of Dad returning to the parlor. "Daddy, please, let's take her to the hospital." I turned to him, begging with all my heart. He turned on me then. "Which hospital? If anybody finds out about this from you, I promise you, I will kill you," he threatened. "You will kill me? That's what I will do. You just killed your wife, and you are ready to also kill your daughter." He pushed me away as he carried Mom's lifeless body into his room. I couldn't stop wondering why he took her to the room to which he had denied her access when she was alive. I went to my room and shut the door. I laid on my bed and continued weeping. Sleep was impossible. The next morning, Dad summoned all his friends and relatives to inform them that his wife had died. He had gotten up at dawn and taken Mom's body to Monatan Hospital mortuary, the only one in our suburb. Dad pretended and shed crocodile tears as they arrived. He fooled everyone into thinking that he really loved Mom. He told them that she died on her sleep beside him. By noon, the first callers had gone. Dad left the house after the last visitor left. I wished they stayed longer. I didn't want to be left alone with him. I sat on the sofa in the parlor and started to ponder his threat. If anyone finds out from you that I killed your mother, I will kill you. His words kept ringing in my head, but I knew I couldn't keep this to myself, especially for the benefit of a monster who had been so mean to my mom and me. I wasn't going to keep silent on this. I had to tell someone about it. I stepped out of the house and started walking to the only friend of my dad, who wasn't among the visitors that came to see my dad. Uncle Steve's house wasn't far from ours, so getting there was easy. As I got there in no time and walked into his compound. Unlike ours, his house was one of those which had no gate. I knocked on the door thrice and waited for it to be opened, though I knew it was not locked. It was Uncle Steve who answered the door. I knew it would be so because his wife had left him because they could not make babies. Uncle Steve was a gentleman to the core. He was my favorite, and Mom trusted him. Uncle Steve was now in his late 30s. He was tall, dark, thin, and hairy. Stephen once said that Adeola was a devil to Steve because Uncle Steve was a very handsome man. He was said to be an angel. "Tobi, how are you?" He greeted me cheerfully. "I am fine," I answered. "I am sorry about your mom. I wanted the visitors to leave before I would come down to your dad to discuss the situation over there," he said as he pointed to the sofa and waited for me to settle down. "Can I get you some water?" When I shook my head, he went on. "So what brings you here? Are you afraid to stay at home with your dad?" he asked with a sudden change of mood. "I came to tell you about my mother's death. Don't let my dad deceive you, all that my mother died a natural death. He killed her." I looked away as tears began to stream down my cheeks. Uncle Steve waited for me to regain control, all the while rubbing my back and telling me it's okay. "Are you sure?" he later asked me, his eyes darting here and there, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "Yes," I replied. "And you said you were there, right?" "Yes." "In that case, just go home. I know what to do that will not put you in danger," Uncle Steve said reassuringly. On hearing this, I went back to our empty house, relieved that I had exposed a rapist as well as a murderer. I tidied up as best as I could. The thought of food was the last thing on my mind, but I made myself cook something so I wouldn't bring down trouble on myself so soon after Mom's death. There was no telling what he would do if he came home, and there was no food on the table. I served his dinner before I went to bed. It was as if tragedy had turned me and my story to something unexpected, because I was in the kitchen the following morning when I saw Uncle Steve stepping into our house. Dad opened the gate to let him in. As they settled into their seats, I left the door ajar so I could listen to their conversation from my position in the kitchen. Fear gripped me as I heard Uncle Steve open the discussion. "My brother, I am sure you are aware that your wife was murdered in cold blood." It was more of a statement than a question. "What are you saying?" "You heard me. Are you trying to protect the killers? Who told you she was murdered?" "We are brothers, so let's tell ourselves the truth." Steve paused. "I visited the Monatan Hospital earlier today and saw the battered form of her body." "You are a liar, my brother. I took the corpse to a better mortuary yesterday evening. Somebody told you she was murdered. Tobi did, and she would be punished for lying against me." Dad must be fuming with rage, I thought as I trembled where I was. I have reported you to the police. Dad laughed. I have done so too. It was the handwork of unknown burglars. I came in too late from the club. I am covered. Where was Tobi during the incident? Sleeping, of course. Adeola, I am not sure if the death of your wife is proved. Your daughter will not support this claim of yours. She would not want to lose me now, so she is going to support me whether she likes or not. There's more stake here than you raping her. I could see Uncle Steve standing, maybe about to leave our house. Did she tell you she was raped? Dad was angry. She didn't tell me. Your late wife reported to me. And you didn't ask me about it? Yes, because I didn't believe her. I know you like women, and you have plenty of them, so I thought she was making up a story to get it back at you. You people quarrel a lot. I never saw this one coming. The cat finally caught the mouse and ate it. I will make sure you go to jail, if not as a murderer, then as a rapist. Steve, it was Tobi who told you all these stories. You are wrong for going to report your only brother and friend to the police. I moved close to the door and peeped. Dad brought out an iron rod, which was kept at the back of the chair for protection against burglars. In a swift move, he hit Uncle Steve on the head with it. I heard the sharp cry of pain that stopped with a cruel blow. I bit hard on my lips to keep me from crying out loud at the blows landing on poor Uncle Steve. What have I done? Was he also dead? I should not have told him about my dad. What should I do now? I was frantic. Steve, you are the burglar that killed my wife. You came back to silence me, and I did what I had to do in self-defense. Dad spoke, breathing heavily as he rearranged his brother's body to rest back on the chair. From where I was, Uncle Steve looked like somebody taking a nap. As Dad turned towards the kitchen door, I ran to the cooker, pretending to be cleaning it. Tobi, quickly take a taxi to that chemist friend of mine at the gate. He will give you some drugs for me. I have called him to tell him you are on your way. Dad gave me 2,500 naira, and he piloted me through the kitchen door without allowing me a chance to see Uncle Steve's slumped body. As I left the house, I passed through Uncle Steve's house, and I regretted ever coming to tell him what happened that even led to his own death. Though I warned him not to confront Dad. Now, he is probably dead. What should I do now? The man who killed his wife and his brother will surely kill his daughter. I decided I would not go to the chemist. I knew he just wanted me out of the house in order not to hide his crime from me. I veered to Lagos Expressway from under the bridge and continued walking along the road to nowhere. After some time, I spotted an uncompleted building. I entered it and sat on a block to rest for a while. I started to review my life. If only my mother had known it would end this way. She could have taken my counsel. I wondered how all friends and family could not see through Dad's pretense. Even my mom and I were going through hell. Our house had kept her distance when Mom died. Not listening to her, I remained in this hideout all day. I had with me 2,500 naira. It came as a surprise that nobody came to the building to disturb me. I was exhausted as a result of trekking many kilometers in the opposite direction of where Dad had sent me. At nightfall, a man and 2 women came at different directions and times and took space like I did. Not too long afterward, a man demanded that each of us must pay 200 naira as a rate and protection for the night. I paid, one of the men did not, and was chased out. 3 others came and paid before we slept. The women became friendly. She advised me to go and look for a church and stay there until I could locate my family. You are too young to be exposed to streets danger. Go to the Winners' Church along the back street. There will give you temporary accommodation. 3 days into my taking refuge in the church, I realized it wasn't easy or convenient for me to live without money. I started doing odd jobs through the help of the Supreme Mother of the Church. I made little money from washing clothes, doing house chores, and babysitting for church members and help seekers. It wasn't easy for me, and I fell ill. I ended up spending my wages on malaria drugs. But one thing was going well for me. I always managed to win the hearts of my customers. One day, one of my customers informed me about a vacancy for a housemaid. One of her friends in Lagos needed a housemaid, and she saw me as the perfect candidate. All through a huge decision, it wasn't a difficult one to make. I was ready to move away from Ibadan and from Dad. I wanted to leave my ugly and miserable past behind. I told her I was ready to go. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Ma. I am very sure, Ma." "Then come to me tomorrow," she said, as I was ready to go back to my latest home, the church. The next day, the kind and nice woman gave me the address of the agent that would take me to Lagos. On getting there, I knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. I got frustrated and started to hit the door loudly. It was not long until a voice came from inside. "Who is there?" "I am Tobi, the new house help. I am expected." "Now who they expect you?" The same queried in pidgin. "Madam of the house, Mrs. Ruth Debira. Na im they expect me," I responded. "Na me be houseboy. She no tell me say you dey come. Go ask em." "You never get the work you done start to do, Madam Commando," he said, and shut the door, leaving me outside. Presently, I heard a voice inside, ordering him to open the door and let me in. I smiled to welcome myself to the transit camp. The next morning was something else. We began with our journey at around 8 o'clock. The journey to Lagos was slow and stressful as a result of heavy traffic. We made a stop at a supermarket to buy a few things like toiletries, extra clothes, underwear, and other necessities. It was evening when we finally got to our destination. I was tired. The feeling vanished, however, when I saw the palatial building that was to be my home. The beauty of this residence was a feast for my eyes and compensated for the wearying journey. I felt like exploring, but held myself in check knowing I was here as a maid. "Finally, Tobi, here we are." Mrs. Ruth smiled as she noticed that I liked the place already. "The house is a palace," I said, as the driver finally brought the car to a stop. As I alighted from the car, my eyes quickly went to work. I saw 5 neatly packed cars in front of the building and wondered if they had guests. To the side was a lawn fringed by flowering shrubs. The flowers were exotic. The lawn was manicured like a football field, ready to host the opening match of a World Cup. A man was at work watering the plants with his watering cans. He looked like part of the decor. So quaint. As it was already evening, the time was appropriate for this horticultural assignment. My late mother always said that good gardeners know this. I brought out my box from the car and followed Mrs. Customer, as I always call her, into the house. I really could not wait to see what the house looked like on the inside. I saw that bamboo formed the decor of the entrance. The paintwork in the living room fit nicely with the bamboo on the entrance, as it was a cross between cream and olive. It was tastefully furnished, looking more like an art gallery that I once saw in a magazine than a residence. It helped many paintings. Some of the chairs were made of bamboo with cushions made for sitting comfort. Though I hadn't gone beyond the parlor, I could see the hugeness and magnificence of the house. I felt little inside the place. By the time Mrs. Customer's friend heard our sound, she came out of the kitchen. She and her friend were locked in a warm embrace. "Welcome, Ojo." The journey was the whole day. "That expressway should be called Gridlock Way," Mrs. Customer's friend said as she stepped back from the embrace. "So she is an Igbo woman," I said, after hearing the name her friend called her. "I hope we're not worried?" "Thank God we got here after all," Mrs. Ojo smiled. "I thought we'd take off at dawn, but we didn't leave Ibadan until about 11 a.m. While they talked, I looked on in silence, studying my new madam's profile discreetly. She was tall with a figure to die for. I wondered silently if she worked out to maintain such a perfect figure. Her hair was raven black, and it fringed an oval face that had a little too much makeup on. Dressed in a blue jean, Mrs. Uju's friend looked like a model just then. She turned to me and addressed me in English. I wondered at that because, just a few minutes before, she was chatting merrily with Mrs. Uju in Yoruba. Even though she was an Igbo woman, the Yoruba accent colored her speech when she spoke in English. "You are Tobi." It was more of a statement than a question. Mrs. Uju hadn't introduced us. "Yes, madam," I said simply. "You are going to work here." "My name is Jane," she introduced herself. "Uju is my best friend, and I am sure you will be well behaved so that you won't disappoint both of us." "I will work hard, Ma." "That's good," she beamed, and I felt at ease in her presence. "Mercy," she called, raising her voice as she sat beside her friend. "She is lazy," Mrs. Jane complained about her daughter's laziness to her friend Mrs. Uju. "My biggest headache is her addiction to phone and music." It took quite a time before the daughter of the house came out. "Why are you calling my name?" a female voice responded from behind us. She stood by the staircase and looked about my age. I was surprised at the rudeness in her voice. I loved my late mom, and I never spoke to her as if we were mates. Mrs. Jane Adoroju didn't seem to notice. "I want you to meet Tobi. She is the new house help." "Is that why you called me Mum?" I told I don't want any interruption. She came out and sat near where I stood and looked at me and nodded in approval. "Good evening, Mercy," I greeted. She was the boss. "I am sure you will like her," Mrs. Uju said. "You did not greet your auntie. I have told you again and again to always greet me whenever I come visiting. Or you don't want to see me in my best friend's house?" Mercy didn't say a word. She just smiled and continued fiddling with her phone, oblivious of everything and everyone around her. The silence was uncomfortable. Mrs. Uju coughed, and attention shifted to her. "My friend, Mercy is becoming a spoiled child." "Let's drop the topic," Mrs. Jane snapped. She could lament about her daughter's misconduct, but she could not bear it if anybody said anything contrary about her daughter. Let Mercy show Tobi to her room. If after a month you are not satisfied with her service, call me. I shall come and take her away. She is here to stay. I know Mercy and Daniel will love her, if she minds her own business, Mrs. Jane said. At that, she and Mercy got up to lead me to the room. Mrs. Uju stood up too and went to the guest room downstairs. The stairway was wide, but Mrs. Jane climbed it in twos and was at the landing before I got halfway, struggling with my box. No wonder she looked so fit. "This is your room," she pointed, and stood aside to let me in. "Arrange the place and come downstairs." She followed her daughter to another room. Mercy had climbed the stairs before her mother and I did. My room was very small. It looked like a small store for boxes, as there was only one tiny window. There was a small, old and worn-out mattress that must have been used by generations of housemaids. There was no bedsheet, and the mattress was so flat that one could feel the hardness of the floor while sleeping on it. I switched on the light and saw cobwebs everywhere. From the look of neglect, it was obvious that the room had not been occupied for some years. I dropped my box and went right back to the living room. "Have you cleaned the place?" Mrs. Jane asked as she came down the stairway with me. No, Ma, the room is very dirty. I will need a broom, dustpan, water, and mop. And how long will that take you? She asked, looking into my eyes. I will be fast, I said, though I knew that cleaning the room would take more than a few minutes. I don't believe you, girl. It will take some time to do it. Do you think I am stupid? No, Ma, but I can't tell you, it will take a long time to do it. I thought she must have seen the incredible look I had. Always tell me what is on your mind, she said with pride. Yes, Ma. You are a smart girl. Go and do your cleaning. When you are done, I will show you around the house, she said with pride. Meanwhile, let me check that. My friend is comfortable before dinner is ready. It was only my room I cleaned that day before nightfall. I had a familiarization tour of the building. I was excited about the washing machine. Mrs. Jane explained the arrangements of things in the house, warned me to maintain the orderliness. After dinner, Mrs. Uju said that I should go and rest for the day. Just as I was about to sleep, despite the heat and the uncomfortable mattress, there was a tap on my door, and I heard Mercy say that I should go and open the door for her father and brother. I struggled out of my drowsiness and staggered downstairs. I checked the time. It was 11 p.m. I was told he came home late every day. I opened the door for a short, dark-complexioned, middle-aged man and a boy who looked like he was in his 20s. The security man followed and dropped a small box and a laptop bag in the living room. You must be the new housemaid. Where is my wife? Mr. Adoroju said. She is upstairs, I replied. And she sent you, right? He asked. I sensed he thought I was too new for this assignment. No, sir. Mercy sent me. That girl is damn too lazy, he shook his head. Daniel, you can go to your room. As for you, he said, turning to me, carry this bag and follow me. I picked the laptop bag and followed him. When we got to Mr. and Mrs. Adoroju's room, I gave him the bag and turned towards my room. I saw the younger man that came with Mr. Adoroju as I was about to enter my room. Hello, he said. I am Daniel Adoroju. I am Tobi Adeola, your new housemaid. I noticed Daniel was dark, tall, slim, and quite fit. He was very handsome. He had a short afro haircut which complemented his look. You must stay. Oh, don't worry if Mum and Mercy are mean to you, but the rest of us will be very nice to you. If you enjoyed this story and its valuable lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Foxy for more engaging and inspiring tales. And don't forget to leave a comment below. What did you learn from this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Bye, friends.
highlifeng.com